Dr. Nick Campion, you speak French? You don't know?
Okay. No, English.
So we have our conference, our discussion in English, but most people understand anyway. So we think it's good to open ourselves to English speakers in our television. So you are the main organizer of this
of the conference.
Of the conference.
Yeah, I'm the director of the Sophia Centre at University of Wales Lampeter, which organises the conference.
And you also have your own background as a writer on astrology.
I've written books. I've been commissioned to write quite a lot of books on astrology, and they range from several academic books on the history of astrology to books on popular astrology that I've been commissioned to write. Yeah.
You are adapted. You're compatible with many groups of people, many societies. I like to think of myself as a free-thinking agnostic. Yeah.
So I'll talk to anybody.
I will have that you have in astrology hasn't been a handicap for your career as in the field of academics.
No, not really. And the reason is because I will talk to anybody. I mean, actually, I started studying astrology for several different reasons, and one of them was academic.
Was it from the?
It was because when I was an undergraduate, I was studying the 12th century Renaissance, and there was a throwaway line in a book that astrology was part of the medieval curriculum. And I thought this was fascinating, so I asked my tutor about it, and he regarded it as a matter of complete insignificance. So I decided to find out about it for myself. And I then went on a journey that involved me realising I had to learn astrology. And then I started practicing astrology. And I did that in my 20s. And then, sort of having done that, I returned to being a scholar. Actually, about 1980, I began just to write on the history of astrology and read the history of astrology. And I spent days in the British Library. And I supported myself doing that for a long time by doing commercial astrology.
Yes. Because it's part of the ambiguity of the social statute of people who are connected with astrology, that they have to mix the different aspects. Does that mean that you are also what your idea of astrology is also a very complex body of knowledge? Are you as complex as astrology is?
No, I'm not. You see, I actually know. When I was teaching myself astrology, even though my mission was actually to understand the astrology of the Middle Ages, at that time, so we're talking the middle 1970s, the information was hard to come by. So I ended up studying modern astrology, which is technically simple, and so my practice of astrology was technically simple, and so a lot of the publishing on medieval astrology, the technical side of medieval astrology, has come since then. So I'm interested that that's there, and I know about it, and I could do it, but my interests had already switched to being academic by the time that astrology came along. So I am. My interest in astrology is almost primarily the fact that it exists as a cultural phenomenon.
Yes, that's what I wanted. Culture, cosmology in culture.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I try and follow my interests back to their source, then at the heart of it is a concern with the way that people create order in the universe.
Sure.
And once they've created order, they begin to create meaning and purpose. And so, astrology has been in many cultures, in many civilized cultures, urban cultures, the most appealing way through which philosophers, scholars, intellectuals have constructed meaning. If one takes the whole span of Western history.
Do you think that obviously, astrology belongs to also today to our culture, but does it belong in the same way it belonged in the past? Or what was the first reason why astrology entered into human culture? Or what was the first reason for adopting astrological signals, astrological references for ancient societies?
You see, maybe there is no one single reason. I think that people psychologically incline to different needs, and so it's common to say that astrology is a way of reassuring one's insecurities. I'm quite sure that's the case for some people. For other people, there might be a desire to communicate with the heavens in an inspired manner to gain revealed truth. So, I think one would have different psychological motivations that gave rise to it.
But I really believe, as in myself, I use sometimes the word culture. But for astrologers, to call astrology culture is sometimes something they don't accept, because they think it's very reductive and very relative.
Yeah.
It means that do you think really astrology is just a culture, or it's also a culture? Do you think that astrology by saying that astrology is a culture, the risk is to say that astrology does not really exist, it only exists because people believe in it?
You see, actually, this is an argument that you find in one of the most influential astrologers of the 20th century, Dane Rudyard.
Yeah.
It was a subject of lecture now. So Dane Rudyard has explicitly stated that, while there may be an astrology of influences or causes which affects people, that was not his concern. His concern was with an astrology which enables people to transcend their physical selves and enter into union with the cosmos. And that astrology, he was quite clear, is culturally relative. It will change from time to time and from culture to culture, because it's merely a matter of convenience to enable people to make a spiritual leap.
Yeah.
And so, Rudyard was one of the most influential astrologers in the West of the 20th century. And he said that. And there's one of his disciples, Alexander Ruperti, has a quote which I use a lot. Ruperti, lecturing in about 1990, said, there's never been any such thing as an astrology with a capital A. In other words, he was saying there's never been an astrology which deals with the objective truth about the cosmos. And so this is astrologers talk. I find that fascinating, because those are comments which skeptics could also make. It's just that for Rudyard and Ruperti, there was still value in this system of just convenient symbols.
You remember we were a few years ago in Amsterdam at the conference on the history of astrology, and I have the memory, the souvenir that you were a little skeptical about any sort of rationalization of astrology, or that I would like you to ask you a basic question. How do you connect astrology with divination? Is the history of divination astrology a part of the history of divination, or is this a totally different field?
Well, I think it can be. I think that we always have to remember that astrology has been practiced in different ways and has been linked to different philosophical models. And so I think there are three main models. So that I would call a Babylonian model, in which you're talking to divine entities in the sky, a Platonic model in which you're looking at an ordered cosmos, an Aristotelian model in which you do have influences and causes. Now, the question is with divination. it can suit any of those models. Divination itself is something which arises in different forms and of which people have different ideas. I mean, divination classically should mean communication with an external divinity.
Yes.
But for some modern psychologists like James Hillman, the gods are recast as one's psychological archetypes, and so divination becomes a sort of psychological projection in a process. So divination does not exist as a single understood practice or philosophy.
Yes. You think that you insist on the fact that astrology changes, and for instance, the fact that they have been borrowing so many elements from new astronomy. What do you think about the attempts of astrologers to legitimize this usage of this mythology, which is in fact injected through the fantasy of astronomers? That they decide to call Pluto, and what is your actual explanation, or how do you connect yourself to this introduction of mythology through modern astronomy? Which is a paradox in a certain way.
It is, but let me just talk historically again.
Yes.
I'm going to use the example of the 1490s, when there was a crisis in European astrology. And I think that then astrologers reacted to this crisis in, I think you can identify three different ways. One lot of astrologers said the critics don't understand astrology, they've all got it wrong, astrology is fine as it is. The second lot said, well, okay, astrology is fine, but it's got some problems, so their solution was to strip away what they called Arabic superstition and go back to Ptolemaic astrology and firm foundations. The third group, which ultimately included Kepler, said we've got to strip away everything and go back to first principles and create an empirical astrology, empirically verifiable. And so you've got amongst the world of astrology these different solutions to the problem of how astrology works and whether it works or whether it doesn't work. And so, so there is what I would call now a Keplerian tradition. So that when astrologers start using asteroids, minor bodies like centaurs and so on, well, I see them as just part of that Keplerian tradition. It's a progressive tradition, rejects the past and looks to the future. It's modernist. So my overall interest in that phenomenon, which happens now, is that it's a very interesting one for historians, because we can see astrological meaning being constructed and how it's constructed. Mm-hmm. So, when Chiron was discovered, 1979 or 80, it was named Chiron. So straight away the astrologers start looking at the mythology, they do some charts,
exactly.
They find it works. And so we've got an example there for the way that astrological meaning was probably constructed in ancient times.
Yes, exactly. It's that's what I said during the lecture, that there is a certain ambiguity between astrologers and astronomers, because they are using the same objects and the same names, but they don't have the same motivations, and they don't have the same stakes. I mean, it's not for the same reasons, and we should not necessarily try to rationalize what the astronomers do, because the paradox is that astronomers are scientists, but when they start to do what I call meta-astronomy, when they start to just give names to planets and give names to the zodiac, they are not any longer scientists at all. No. So the astronomers are, one phase of the astronomers is very scientific, and the other one is just, well, why not giving this name to the planet? And in that case, we should not try to understand the logic of what they are doing at this level.
You see, I think astronomers a lot of them are also trapped in the myth of science and the need to appear scientific. So, most astronomy magazines and textbooks are technical. If you go to astronomy lectures, they're technical. But you will also find at the same time, scattered throughout astronomical statements and literature, references to the awe of the universe, the wonder of the cosmos, the magic of the stars. And that for me is the underlying motive, so that when amateur astronomers stay out in the freezing cold North European winter, gazing through their telescope, they get an emotional, physical high from seeing the phase of Venus or the moons of Saturn. That's not scientific. They're getting a lift. They are, that's their motive. So, and that they are seeking enchantment.
Yes.
In the sky.
And yes, and yes. In fact, they are contributing very strongly to this enchantment.
Yeah.
And well, let's come back to another aspect. What about? I don't know if you have been considering this aspect. Well, there are astrologers who practice astrology because they give lectures and they give consultations. But do they practice astrology as a sort of way of life, as a sort of not really religious, but modus vivendi between themselves? What do you think? Where there are many examples in the history of astrology of societies, probably we could think that very old societies have been practicing astrology as a sort of consensus, but this attitude of sort of social astrology has been lost. It has become a very professional activity, and many astrologers even today are not considering astrology differently. They only consider astrology as a way of earning money.
You know what? I'm not sure if we are, because the fact is that professional astrologers earn very little money. It's extremely difficult to be a professional astrologer.
Yeah.
I think that actually, if you include, let's define astrology. If we include astrology, say, as people who have done courses in astrology and learned how to cast birth charts, I would guess that 99% are amateurs.
Right.
Hobbyists. And if you go to an astrology conference in the UK or the USA, for example, I think you'll find maybe 5% who really earn a living from astrology.
All right. But my point was not just money or not money. My point was being astrologer only to give, even if it's free, to give a consultation or give courses, or using astrology as a real reference of life for a group.
Yeah.
And I would say, not to live from astrology but to live with astrology. I mean, for instance, could we imagine groups, for instance, astrological association or astrological groups, do they really use astrology in their own way, in their way of living together?
You see, I don't think so.
No, we don't.
I don't think
but
so.
But culturally, probably there was something like that at the beginning of astrology. Might have been some sort of reference common to a group.
Yeah, you see, I think one of the, astrology's potential uses is as conflict avoidance, because it was actually Johann Kepler's argument for the way astrology should be used. You see a difficult transit coming up. Well, you should take evasive action, or at least you should moderate your behaviour. But I don't think there's any evidence that's what astrologers do.
No.
In their own universe, they are completely subject to the causes, influences, or celestial whims of the universe in which they participate.
Yes. Very often they react. So when something happens, they say, "Oh, I'm being very surprised." They don't even necessarily. When they are in a situation, they will make the effort to connect with astrology. But in general life, in private life, they react as anybody else.
Yeah. No, well, you see, what was lost from Western culture was that sense of astrology being part of a ritual lifestyle, which obviously has survived in India. So in India, if the astrologer sees a difficult transit, well, you go to the temple and do your puja, and you focus on your own conduct.
Yes.
Whereas in Western astrology that's been lost. So Western astrology ends up being sort of purely descriptive. It describes a situation and doesn't really tell you what to do about it. I mean, the development of astrological counselling is designed to show people what to do, how to use their astrology, but whether that works, I'm not sure.
You mean that the word they're not really counseling, in fact?
Well,
it's called consultation, but it's not really giving a real counsel.
Well, they may be. I don't know. I don't want to comment on that area of activity because I have so little experience.
They don't want to take the responsibility of really. There is this new word, coaching, now, which is very familiar.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of way to say, well, they are usual astrologers. We are not really counselors, and people who really counsels are coaches.
Yeah. I don't know, Jacques. That's not.
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I don't have the kind of personal insider experience so much of that world and how it works. But what I observe of astrologers in general is that they pursue as many conflicts and animosities as anybody else.
So I would like to ask you now about the dialectic between theory and practice in astrology. It seems that in a certain way, and another question which is connected is astrology a counterculture? Is it a sort of culture which which attracts people who just precisely do not want to go according to the principle of the dominant culture, and which might attract, in many cases, more women than men? And there is the idea that it's sort of field of science which is a citadel of resistance of a certain feminine culture, which will give more importance to the practice. It works, and not really to the importance of the theoretical development.
It's astrology is countercultural in terms of, say, the educated culture of Western society as dominated by universities and so on. Then astrology is countercultural. But astrology is utterly embedded in the popular culture of Western societies. I mean, I don't think most people have any doubts about the validity of astrology. It doesn't really concern them. So astrology, I'd say, it's part of the majority culture overall.
What I mean by counterculture, I mean normally in many fields of science, practice is only a development of theory. And theoreticians have a sort of power, and they change the theory, they improve the theory, and the practitioners do not impose their laws in certain ways. They aren't going to say, well, this theory might not be very, very strong, but we know how to use it. And by counterculture, I mean a field where the practitioners have a sort of dominant influence.
No, I think I think astrology is a practice. I think the relationship between theory and practice is a very tenuous one. In astrology. If you look at most astrology books are entirely about practice. And there are different rationales for astrology, a theory of inferences or a theory of signs and so on. But I think that has very little bearing on practice. There's almost no discussion of those competing theories in the education, and most educational programs in astrology. They're purely about practice. Here's something which you do. You don't think about it, you do it.
Yeah, but there still are a certain number of, you mentioned Kepler, there are still some reformers of astrology who try to produce a new set of knowledge in a certain way, and it seems that they haven't been heard very much.
Well, you've got...
Especially in the 60s, there were, in France, many theoreticians,
Yep.
and they tried to bring astrology to something different, and what they have done is more or less forgotten,
Yeah.
and we return to a sort of, and this is one of my questions here, history of astrology can be used by astrologer to justify a sort of status quo,
Yeah.
and saying, well, and to justify that astrology should include as many different techniques as possible, because it is in the books, you know. So in fact, history of astrology can be used precisely against any possibility for astrology to transform itself.
You can always use tradition, can't you, to resist change and to oppose change. You know, in astrology there are traditionalists and there are modernists.
But history of astrology seems to be
reactionaries and revolutionaries.
astrology seems to have been instrumentalized by conservatives to enforce the.
Yeah.
I remember in this. By the way, for instance, you have known, for instance, the phenomenon created by John Adey, for instance. How do you understand it in the history of the 20th century? Is it as an attempt to it seems at the time of Adey, the theoreticians had a sort of more credit than they have now.
I would.
They were representing some sort of hope, some sort of future of something new. And in France today, in the 60s and 70s, there was some sort of ascension of the theoreticians or of the statisticians even.
I would look at it in terms of there being a modernist program in astrology, a reforming program, which could be spiritual, psychological, scientific, and was represented very strongly in the 20th century by the theosophists from a spiritual point of view, and then the psychologists, primarily Jungians, and the statisticians. There are three modernist programs, they have run out of energy. Those programs, there's no doubt, but they're particularly the scientific program ran out of energy.
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
By the way, so let's come back to the project of the Sophia Center what is the real signification? You think that it's what do you expect? What do you hope that this enterprise will bring? What will be the fruits of this enterprise?
Well,
in the long term.
Okay. Let me look at the position of discussion of cosmology and the history of cosmology in the academic world as a whole. It's heavily dominated in historical terms by the history of astronomy, with astrology tending to be edited out, and in terms of contemporary cosmology, only certain cosmologies are discussed. Now, as a historian or a historian of ideas, I have no interest in any set of ideas being true. But when I look at the fact that in our culture, popular astrology is huge, various esoteric cosmologies like the anthroposophists, the Rudolf Steiner followers, are very influential in certain areas. I find it strange that discussions of contemporary cosmology and culture exclude such people. They're edited out. So, if you go to an astronomy conference, you'll find that there may be a great deal of interest in, Amazonian cosmology or some sort of native African belief in the stars. But if you talk about what's happening in the West, it gets closed down. And because of the culture wars in the West between scientists and others and so on. And so I actually want to, within my centre, see that the discussion of cosmology involves everybody. There is no editing out of certain groups or belief systems. And again, I began as a historian in the last 10 years I've had an anthropological training, so my instincts as an anthropologist say you can't exclude people, certain groups, from your view of what's happening in a society. You have to include everybody.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen at the moment, so I want it to happen.
Yes, so you think, in many cases it brings astrologers to this sort of, to reach this level.
Well, it does. It does indeed, because astrology is one of the. It is a very important part in terms of popular culture, about the way people see the cosmos, and so it deserves to be looked at as a cultural phenomenon.
Oh yes, and let us pass to the question of the achievements of astrology in the 20th century. Do you think that modern astrology has really brought a sort of validity to astrology? Mundane astrology.
Mundane astrology.
Has it been no? It thinks it's the result. It is very. It's neutral. I mean, they have not. Doesn't been convinced more convincing than anything else.
No, not at all. No.
For instance, it has. On the contrary, you would say on the contrary that more modern astrology has shown the limits of astrology. Or
no, I think that mundane astrology. There's so few astrologers do it, and very few of those do it with any rigor or intelligence.
Yes.
I would say. So it doesn't. It scarcely exists.
Oh, there was a sort of enthusiasm at the end of the 80s with Barbeau, with its
That's right. I think André Barbeau did very interesting work, but Barbeau was one man. Barbeau's work was propagated in England by Charles Harvey.
Yes.
One man.
Yes. A solo doesn't make the screen.
What happens is when there's an international crisis, there's a big surge of interest amongst astrologers in mundane astrology, and then it dies away again. They all want to know what's going to happen in the world, but there's very little thought. I mean, most of the concern of people who are interested in mundane astrology is not with how to work seriously with astrology, but in issues like the coming crisis in the Mayan calendar, for example, in 2012. And,
2012.
If that is actually, if you looked at the mundane astrologers as being astrologers, people concerned with astrology and his view of the world as a whole, then I would think that 99% of the material is probably now, if you did a web search, it's on the Mayan calendar. And it's apocalyptic.
Yes, Mayan calendar, that's right.
Jacques, we should probably
thank you very much. Yes,
to go and
that's right. It's very much. I am very thankful to you for this communication. Precisely of a television at the service of astrology, and which will illustrate all the aspects of astrology through images and through films, etc.
I'm interested in Jacques. I should look. I haven't seen it. I should look forward to seeing it.
There is nothing like that which exists in the Anglo-Saxon world or in German world?
No. Nothing in the Anglo-Saxon world.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are pioneers.
You are pioneers.
Thank you. I gave you one guide.
Yes.
So there was not there was a Uranial, but there was never a real dictionary of astrologers describing their activities one after the other. And it is interesting. We have the tendency in France to be more communitary. I mean, we try to collect all the information about astrologers, and this. I don't know why we do it in France more than in any other place.
Yeah, we talk about it.
Yeah, good.
Anyway, Jacques, we
bye bye. So, can you give me once more your name?
Yeah, my name's Ian Davis.
So I haven't followed entirely the lecture, but I got some elements of the lecture. So you think Rudyard was a major personality in astrology?
A mixture. Yes, I mean he was the themes in his work were New Age, Theosophy and psychology, and to integrate them into new astrology. And he was very much a campaigner. He was an activist rather than an intellectual. That's how I would perceive him.
And he succeeded to have an influence on his fellow astrologers?
Yes,
He has been he has changed, how did he succeed to change the attitude of astrologers?
I think he was the first astrologer to integrate psychology. So on that level, yeah.
I'm always surprised. I'm always surprised when I hear that. You mean that before you can have one before Rudyard, they were not. The psychology was not an essential element of astrology.
I think the ideas of Jung and Freud became part of mass consciousness in the 20s and 30s, and Rudyard was writing in the 20s and 30s. So you had Alan Leo before, but his psychology was very 19th century. So there's that difference.
I don't understand exactly, but I hear you mean that astrology has become a how did he succeed to connect astrology with psychology?
Because he linked concepts such as individuation, archetypes, psychological complexes, self-development, which are all part of psychology. He linked those to astrology. So rather than it being about fixed predictions, it became about you have choices, you have free will, you have ways of developing.
And he succeeded in doing that?
Yes, I think so.
Could you give me an example of such a successful link?
Well, if you look at astrology nowadays, it's talking a lot about self-development, personal growth, individuation, archetypes, particularly planetary archetypes. Like Pluto. Pluto in particular was the first to look at in a psychological way. Pluto was discovered in 1930. By 1936 he was writing about it as a planetary transformation. So he was really the first to do that. And Pluto can be seen as an archetype that's connected to psychotherapy.
You mean he translated what astrologer had been saying in psychological terms, in psychological equivalence?
Yes, he took Jungian and Assagioli's ideas into astrology.
Yes. And yourself, are you an astrologer?
I'm an astrologer and a counsellor.
Yeah. And are you limiting yourself to your Rudyard, or have you other influences or other techniques?
No, I don't limit to Rudyard at all. There's things I don't like about it.
Oh, yeah. You have a certain distance towards Rudyard.
It can be a bit preachy.
Oh, for instance, what you have put aside from Rudyard, and how you replace it by something else. What was your evolution about Rudyard?
Well, I trained in psychosynthesis, and Rudyard was a friend of Assagioli. So on that level, there's a connection. Rudyard and Assagioli were friends. So when I studied psychosynthesis, I wasn't an astrologer. It wasn't where I was at. So it's subsequent
Oh,
So it was 2000.
so you think that you can bring something to astrology? If you have the
With my psychological
the
clients.
perspective of bringing new links between astrology and your field of synthesis. You think you will succeed in introducing new links between astrology and other fields of knowledge? You yourself. Will you continue?
I sort of do astrological counselling, so yes, I believe they can integrate
So you think that most astrologers follow Buddha, or there are some conflict
people. You need to ask other people. I think a lot of people dislike him.
Yeah?
Because he preaches, he talks at you.
He doesn't do
Okay, thank you.
Oh, right.
So if you speak in French, it will be in French. But now, for instance,
Unlike the English, many French people speak English.
if you speak English now, it will not be doubled. It will be your real voice.
Right, okay.
So if you speak English, the record will be in English.
yeah.
Maybe we could put some subtitles, but I don't think we'll do it.
That's
It's a
how-
very complex
Yeah.
story to do. So it will be in original version.
Yeah.
So repeat your name.
Jody Kolarek.
Have you? So what is your not your level, but what is your importance in the astrological world? Are you a beginner? Are you a professional? Are you a writer? Are you a thinker?
I do astrology professionally, so I see clients, and I would like to progress my astrology into writing. I think about astrology every day and astrologize the world.
You astrologize the world. That's a nice expression.
Yeah. So I'm living in astrology, so yeah, I'm fairly young in astrology. Most people I meet are a lot older in astrology, so
You are enthusiastic.
yeah, I'm passionate about astrology. Yeah.
So how deeply are you involved in astrology? How deeply astrology is conducting your life?
Well, just in the past year, I've been doing several readings a month for people that some of which I don't know. So my consultancy work is growing. I'm very interested in traditional astrology and horary astrology. Recently I've been getting involved in learning about medical astrology and medieval ideas of correspondences with healing from astrology. I've done a few talks with small astrology groups, and
You are trying to find proselytes?
to find what, sorry?
I mean, to bring people to astrology?
To bring people.
To convince, to make a sort of... you are a missionary of astrology in a way?
I've got no agenda to convert people that don't think in the astrological way. I think that's done through a very personal journey, people coming into astrology. But I'm there to share my knowledge of astrology with people and to debate astrology and its whole the way astrology works and the phenomena that surrounds astrology. I think is a very mystical subject that's ongoing, and I think that
Excuse me, what is... when you speak of astrology, what sort of astrology are you alluding to? Is it the astrology, or is it a special type of astrology, or do you consider astrology as a...
that's
sort
a
of,
difficult question to answer because when you get these very fractured areas of astrology now,
I think I use lots of different. Sometimes I would use a very psychological approach. I think where I feel that I fit into is I see astrology as divination. So each act of astrology is a form of reading the signs and showings of another intelligence. So that's probably where I fit in. I certainly don't see it as a science, and I believe it's a fruitless activity of trying to find astrology rooted in a causal world.
So you don't want to spend your energy by... We are going to follow them because they are going to the other place.
I've got to get my stuff.
Yes,
so.
I fascinating career, in a way, for the next...
Yes, I hope I can. One of the downfalls of being an astrologer is that we're not accepted in society. So there's no sort of seat of profession in astrology where astrologers are respected in society as a whole. So, I think as a jobbing astrologer we struggle along making a living, and there's lots of very good astrologers out there that aren't helping people and aren't doing astrology because there's no place for them in this society, whereas other times there's, you can set up a practice and people would come to you and you can help all sorts of people, because when you mention astrology to most people, they either think you're deluded or I don't know what they think.
But you don't suffer too much from this situation of pariah or something. I mean,
what do you mean?
I mean, you are strong. You think you're strong enough to resist to this negative attitude.
Yes, in my own world, if I've got the support around me from fellow thinkers, but if I was thrown in a room full of lawyers or academics, in some area, I think I would struggle putting a good argument across. So, there you go.
I'll come back to the idea of how would you define astrology? What is your definition of astrology?
Oh God, that's a big question.
I mean, what is your? You define a nice formula to explain what is astrology.
What is?
What does it study?
I think what I said earlier about astrologizing the world.
Yes, nice.
But it's a way of framing the world in a symbolic and imaginable process where there is a divine that's there and an intelligent universe or whatever, where the world is speaking back to you in some way. So there's a dialogue with the cosmos. So when we do astrology and we cast horoscopes, we are receiving intelligence and passing on that information. That's what I believe astrology is in its effective form. So
yes. So your answer is it brings a sort of mathematics to the world, or something irrational. It is a paradox that sometimes astrology is considered as irrational, and at the same time it brings a new rationality, a new logic.
A new logic. I'm not sure if that's.
We have arrived. No problem now. We already.
Yes. I'm not sure if it's very healthy to see astrology as explaining the logic of the cosmos.
No, so it's not your definition.
I suppose I see it more of a dialogue with spiritual intelligence, actually, in a way of reading signs and symbols and interpreting messages that are being passed through.
Yes.
Actually, that's quite controversial. Even in astrology, that's a controversial thing to say. Actually,
true. Yeah.
But that's my explanation of it. So, an omen reader
So it's
to
astrology.
say
Yeah?
astrology is omen reading. That's how.
Astrology is a science. As astrology is a religion. Astrology. What is astrology? To what sort of activity could you relate astrology? Is astrology something totally different from the rest of the world, or do you see other fields which have something to do with astrology, although they are not
I think
astrology?
the practice of astrology can lead to religious engagement and engagement with a spiritual idea of life, and yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Sorry.
Oh, do you think it could be? Oh, the word it's a little. It's sort. There could be a church of astrology or a sect of
That sounds scary.
or a sect where people who believe in astrology would live together, or a way of life.
I think this idea of belief in astrology, I think it's a bit dangerous really to say that astrology gives you a belief. I think I see it as more of a way of having dialogue with a deeper meaning rather than I wouldn't like to create I wouldn't like to see a sort of a belief of astrology in a church of astrology. No, I think that would be quite a dangerous thing to have.
No, but I mean a community of people.
Well, there is now, isn't there?
And I'm sure. I don't think that astrological associations are really communities of people who live according to astrology. They use astrology, they live from astrology, but they don't really have astrology as a real way of life in together. This is to be created. I can tell you that as a piece of advice. All the attempts, the astrologers, the association of astrology are not really places where people organize their life, their common life, according to astrology. You had this feeling? You thought so?
Yeah,
you think so?
Yeah, I think it's a very fractured community in astrology where people have very different thoughts. It's very difficult to even find your fellow astrologer friends agreeing on the interpretation of what a planet in a sign
so they don't,
means.
Since they don't have the same astrology to share, so in fact they don't live with astrology. When you can't share astrology, they live according to the principles of the normal society. They react as anybody else because precisely there is no dominant system which they can use in life. And at the same time, for instance, what is your name again?
Jody.
Did you give me your mail?
Jody Collerette.
What is your mail?
My mail?
Your email?
Jody Collerette. That's spelled JODEY COLLORICK at btinternet.com.
All right. Well, for instance, if you see what sort of astrology the audience has received, they know about the zodiacal signs.
The what? Sorry, the
general audience, the general public.
Yeah.
They know about astrology. They know the signs of the zodiac, but they don't know of any system of prediction, which could be. They have no real knowledge of any predictive tool that astrology would use, and what everybody would understand. When astrologers makes prediction, people don't understand how he does it, because they don't have any keys about how he does it.
Yes.
They read their horoscope, they understand that they are Taurus or Leo, but they don't understand why the astrologer will say today is like that or today is different.
Yeah.
So there is two aspects. They know what he means when they say he's of a certain sign, but they don't know how he is giving some results about what's going to happen.
But
maybe we could change something about that. Maybe.
Well, it isn't that you know, as a society, isn't it important for all of us to play our particular role in society and not, you know, I'm just thinking to ancient times where you would have a reader of the oracle, and you would go to the reader of the oracle and you would ask, should I marry this person, or do the gods permit this act? Is the astrologer not better playing that part rather than everyone share. You know,
Oh.
divination. It's only for certain
I
people.
see.
It's not for
So
everyone.
you want the astrologer to be a sort of priest who has a certain knowledge,
Yes.
and you don't want astrology to be divulgated.
That's right. I mean, look at what society does to many, say,